Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, will Turkey have troops in Gaza as part of an international peacekeeping force? That is a key sticking point in the talks over President Donald Trump's peace plan. The Israeli Knesset votes to extend Israeli sovereignty over its communities in the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, a move the White House opposes. We're going to bring you the story from Jerusalem. Could the peace deal collapse even before it goes into phase 2? We're going to hear from an expert with the Middle East Forum about the Trump team's negotiating strategy. And a major evangelistic outreach by World Harvest Ministry this weekend in South Carolina. We're going to bring you a preview of this move to preach the gospel in the Palmetto State. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, October 23rd, going to begin this half hour in Israel, where top members of the Trump administration are working with the Israeli government on key parts of President Donald Trump's peace plan, with Vice President J.D. Vance wrapping up his trip just hours before Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives. But there are still some disagreements on key points. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story. She's reporting from Jerusalem.
Israeli police escorted Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha to the Old City for a tour of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site where many believe Jesus was crucified. Israeli government spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian said Vance's visit and meetings with Israeli leaders made a strong impression.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said he was impressed with the vice president's clarity, sharpness, solidarity for our common cause, and sincere friendship that he saw in conference and private meetings that took place today.
One sticking point is allowing any troops from Turkey to take part in a peacekeeping force in Gaza. Turkey's President Erdogan strongly supports the Muslim Brotherhood, the same group that spawned Hamas. When asked about Turkey's involvement, Netanyahu said,
"So I have very strong opinions about that. You want to guess what they are?"
Vance gave Netanyahu room to disagree.
We don't want in Israel, we don't want a vassal state, and that's not what Israel is. We don't want a client state, and that's not what Israel is. We want a partnership. We want an ally here.
U.S.-Israel analyst Eli Piepsh told CBN News that Israel will take action if its national security is threatened in Gaza by Qatar or Turkey.
This is going to be the opportunity where if Qatar and Turkey are going to be acting and are going to be trying to rehabilitate, are going to protect Hamas instead of disarming Hamas, Israel is going to be very, very quick to act. If Israel acted in Doha a few weeks ago, Israel can act in Gaza, even if there are Qatari or Turkish elements.
Piepsh says Turkey and Qatar value their relations with the U.S. over their relations with Hamas.
And that, I think, is a fundamental feature of this agreement. And if there's going to be friction between those countries and Israel, it will also mean there'll be friction between those countries and the U.S. And I don't think Turkey and Qatar want to have friction with the U.S.
Shortly after Vance leaves Israel, Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives. Rubio is scheduled to meet with Netanyahu on Friday. Wednesday, Israel's parliament advanced a bill extending Israeli sovereignty over its communities in biblical Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. While the vote appeared to be a political maneuver aimed at the Netanyahu government, Rubio said such a move could endanger the peace process.
That's a vote in the Knesset, but obviously I think the president's made clear that's not something we'd be supportive of right now, and we think is even threatening to the peace deal.
Meanwhile, the funeral of returned hostage Tal Haimi took place in his home of kibbutz near Yitzhak, which he died defending on October 7th. And Thai hostage Sonthaya Okarasri was honored prior to sending his body home for burial. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem to continue our coverage. So, Chris, how significant is this vote in the Knesset to extend Israel's sovereignty over their communities in the West Bank?
Well, there in Judea and Samaria gives a sense of the momentum, Ephraim, behind this movement. It's the second vote that I'm aware of there in the Knesset to go ahead and advocate for sovereignty. However, it's more symbolic. It really has to be the government that would have to go ahead and declare that sovereignty. It seems right now that current conditions make it unlikely. As we saw, Marco Rubio said the president doesn't want that to happen right now. and just what happened several years ago during the initial Abraham Accords agreement. The UAE opposed the move then about declaring sovereignty on Judea and Samaria as it has now. So there seems to be a choice right now. Could you have an expanded Abraham Accords, including perhaps Saudi Arabia, or would you have sovereignty? That seemed to be the decision back in 2020, and now in 2025, this is the same sort of dilemma or decision that Israel and the nations are making. And why would they want sovereignty? Well, this is the biblical heartland. Most of the Bible took place in Judea and Samaria, all the way from Abraham to Jesus. Just the other day, I was near the Samaritan's well on Sunday, and so that's why many in the Knesset, many here in Israel and around the world, they want Israel to declare its sovereignty over the biblical heartland.
Let's talk about this international security force in Gaza. What are the chances Turkey will have troops there?
Well, it seems to be that may be one of the main things being discussed right now with Vice-President J.D. Vance and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and perhaps it's a subject of conversation with Secretary of State Marco Rubio coming in just a few hours. One of Netanyahu's red lines is no Turkish involvement. And why would that be? Well, if you listen to the rhetoric of Turkish President Erdogan in the last few years and even beyond that, it's pretty alarming for Israel. I'll give you one quote. He said, "We may come suddenly one night." That is, come suddenly to Israel. He said, "Oh, Israel, you have an atom bomb, a nuclear bomb, and you are threatening with it. We know this, and now the moment of your death is coming. Have as many nuclear bombs as you want. Have whatever you want. You're a goner." Now, that's from Turkish president. So this is something that Israel is very wary about, of any Turkish government. We talked about this, I believe, yesterday. Ephraim, Erdogan has this idea of a neo-Ottoman empire, reestablishing the Ottoman Empire that fell back in 1917 during World War I. And then many of the global powers at that time split up the Middle East. That's what we know it today. So they're very wary of President Erdogan and his ambitions against Israel and specifically here, Jerusalem.
What does the Trump administration want to see in Gaza?
Well, apparently they want perhaps Turkey involved, maybe Qatar involved. They feel like this may be essential to the plan's success. They also perhaps want the Palestinian Authority involved, but this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu, again, is very adamant against. He criticized the PA at the UN General Assembly, asking, can a leopard change its spots? They still have the pay to slay, where they're actually paying terrorists that have injured or wounded or killed Jews here in Israel. And they also have an education curriculum that teaches that Palestinians will eventually replace Israel. So all of those believe that this is something that Netanyahu doesn't want, but it could be that these are conditions that the United States does want, and hence maybe all this diplomacy going on as we speak.
What are Prime Minister Netanyahu's priorities for the peace plan?
Well, he wants Hamas disarmed. He wants Gaza demilitarized. He wants Gaza no longer to pose a threat to Israel. These are some of the war goals at the very beginning. It would be, that Hamas would be defeated, that it wouldn't be able to rule Gaza, and all the hostages would come home. So now we're at the phase where the hostages, thankfully, have come home, except some of the deceased bodies. But those are some of the goals that Prime Minister Netanyahu has on his agenda.
Do Israel and the U.S. believe these disagreements can be worked out?
Well, they must, because there's a lot of intense diplomacy going on. As I said, J.D. Vance is just leaving. Marco Rubio is just arriving. And Vance, by the way, went to the city of David, as Julie said in her report, not only to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The city of David is sort of the heart of Jerusalem. This is where King David established his kingdom more than 3,000 years ago. And I think the purpose of that visit certainly was Vance to see it himself, but I think Israel wanted to see the connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem and the land of Israel that goes back 3,000 years and more.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you as always for your insights. We'll be checking back in with you come tomorrow. Coming up, we're going to explore if President Trump's Gaza peace plan will ever get a chance to take effect. And a Middle East expert shows us what the administration is doing to stabilize the region when we come back. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Many are wondering if the Gaza peace deal is on the verge of collapse before Phase 2 begins. Middle East Forum Director Gregg Roman explores this question, and he shares why he believes President Donald Trump sent Vice-President Vance to Israel instead of sending him to Turkey or Qatar to pressure Hamas.
I think there's a few reasons, but the most important is to keep confidence on the Israeli side that the American government is dedicated to Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire plan. And I think that having those who have the permission of the president to negotiate directly with the other side, being envoys Kushner and Witkoff, and also Vice President Vance, who has not been wholly involved in these negotiations up until this point, is to show the level of dedication that the White House is giving to this and the level of seriousness that Washington is investing in this process. And I wouldn't be surprised that after these meetings in Jerusalem, those envoys will go on to Turkey, will go on to Qatar, will go on to Egypt, not just meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu as the American side, but the head of Egyptian intelligence, thereby trying to show the Egyptians are committed to this as well. So we'll see what happens with the rollout, but we're teetering right now on the potential for going back into conflict with Hamas.
I saw a post on X this week from open source intel quoting Hamas senior official Mohammed Nazal, who said Hamas will not disarm, and he stated the ceasefire is only a hudna, a pause to rebuild the terror group's strength. So how concerned are you that the president and his team are negotiating with terrorists, those who will not give up their goal of destroying Israel?
The way that I see this right now is like Grant giving Lee the terms Appomattox Courthouse. This is an unconditional ceasefire, an unconditional surrender on Hamas's behalf. And if they do not comply, then the president has promised he will allow for IDF forces or an international security force to go in and do the job instead of allowing Hamas to do it by themselves. So I think that that commitment, both promising to engage in dialogue, but if Hamas spurns that dialogue, a full American commitment to allow the Israelis in the West to finish the job against Hamas. So I have no doubt that either by hook or by crook, by ceasefire negotiations or by force, Hamas will be disarmed.
Well, it isn't just Trump. European Union leaders insist that Hamas disarm, and President Trump warned Hamas to get in line or face the consequences.
We made a deal with Hamas that, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated.
I think this is sort of a repeat of what happened with Ukraine and Russia over the first 6 months of his administration. He tried to meet with President Putin. He had a pretty nasty meeting with President Zelensky in the Oval Office. But at the end of the day, Trump showed that if the other side does not comply with what he is asking for, which I think is a pretty fair deal for Hamas, considering the high crimes that they were involved with on October 7th and for the subsequent 2 years afterwards until the ceasefire came into effect last week, that if Trump is not able to get this by negotiations, he will allow Israel to do it by force. You have this as an instance in 8 other processes that have taken place over the past 10 months, and I think this one will be no different.
Dovie Honig, the founder and CEO of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, wrote an opinion column this week suggesting that Hamas fell into its own trap as President Trump used global optics to free hostages and expose Hamas for what it truly is. And then he argued that Trump's strategy was never about believing Hamas could change. It seemed it was about manipulating the world stage to expose their true nature while protecting Israel's right to act decisively. So is that Trump's plan, in your opinion, to give Israel justification for finishing the job? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that if you look at a piece that I wrote, which echoed similar ideas back about a month ago in September on the Middle East Forum's website, you'll see that the genius lies in Trump's plan's potential for failure. Not that it was intended to not succeed, but there's a fail-safe, a tripwire here, where if Hamas does not comply, either way, it gives legitimacy to Israel to finish the job, either through agreeing to negotiations and the deployment of an international security force, the disarmament of Hamas. We already have the release of hostages, and also improving Gaza's civilian life. But if they don't comply, there's full justification, just like that columnist said, that there is sort of a built-in kill switch, or a dead man switch, if you will, that if the negotiations don't work out, there's full international legitimacy to finish the job.
Greg, you've been involved in the Middle East for so long, for years. So tell me, where do you think this is all heading?
Frankly, I think that Hamas, unless it has pressure from its interlocutors in Istanbul and in Doha, will keep on trying to justify their possession of weaponry. And this only deals with one front where Hamas is active, in Gaza. There's been no mention of the West Bank, no mention of southern Lebanon, no mention of their bases in other areas throughout the Middle East. And the only way that Hamas will be forced to comply not just with the Trump terms in Gaza, but to turn itself into a political party, which I don't think will ever happen. Hamas will never disarm unless by force in other fronts, is by agreeing to the Trump conditions. And if they do not, Trump will have to force Qatar and Turkey to impose their own measures to kick Hamas out of those two capitals, and in doing so, leave Hamas without a lifeline in Gaza, thereby giving them two options, one to disarm or to be destroyed by the IDF.
Okay, seems like the ultimate demise of Hamas. Middle East Forum Director Gregg Roman. Thank you, Greg, for sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course, we have more from Gregg Roman on tonight's edition of The Global Lane, along with a look at Trump's handling of Venezuela and Ukraine and potential blunders and disasters ahead. And we're going to pay a visit to major American metro areas where married couples can't afford to raise children. Be sure to watch this evening on the CBN News channel at 8 Eastern. You can also find it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Still ahead, a move to spread the gospel in South Carolina is heading for the state capitol this weekend. We're going to tell you about this upcoming evangelistic outreach right after this. A campaign to bring the gospel to cities in upstate South Carolina is headed for the state's capital. Evangelist Jacob Ebersol's World Harvest Ministry hosts the Columbia, South Carolina Crusade starting tomorrow through Sunday. That's October 24th through the 26th. Churches across the city are joining the outreach. It is the latest in a series of events for the ministry. CBN's Wendy Griffith has this story.
Evangelist Jacob Ebersol of World Harvest Ministry is still flying high after their recent crusade in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
My wildest dreams came true. And you know, so many thought that it wasn't possible in Spartanburg, South Carolina. But what we continue to say is when has impossible ever stopped him? I looked around at people who came from all over South Carolina and all over the country, really. And the Lord was very clear that he wanted us to believe for more.
And as they increased their faith, the team saw a mighty move of God.
Under that tent, we saw there was such a spirit of repentance and reverence. People coming forward, laying down their addictions when we didn't even ask. Even released inmates that were getting baptized. And something that was very unique in Spartanburg was people were watching on live streams, and I was getting word from people that they were filling up their bathtubs in other states and getting baptized while watching the service, which was a unique one for me.
The spirit of repentance and rebirth crossing generational lines.
Droves of teenagers coming to Christ. Honestly, it was hard to manage. And probably my favorite thing I witnessed in the Spartanburg Crusade was our own team members baptizing their children and other family members, and also many answering the call to go on mission with us across the state and across the world.
Jacob, now you're headed for Columbia, the state capital. Tell us how that's coming together and what you're expecting.
The Lord was very clear. If we can reach our capital, then we can truly impact the state. And our ministry team, our World Harvest team, has coined the phrase "from South Carolina to the ends of the earth until the whole world knows." What's happening across the state of South Carolina is a family is assembling to see that through. And what better place to go next than our capital?
Just days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, World Harvest held an outreach at Clemson University. The tragic event changed the course of their crusades.
Leading up to that crusade, we actually had a memorial of Charlie Kirk up at one of our tables. You know, you could see and feel the hunger from the students there. The Charlie Kirk assassination truly did something with not only me, but our team, where we decided that not only are we going to hold these crusades across the 12 major cities in South Carolina, but we're going to go to every university, college, and school and preach the gospel boldly with no hesitation.
Ebersol says after Columbia, they're planning crusades in Charleston and then Myrtle Beach for 2026. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
And if you'd like to attend the Columbia, South Carolina revival this weekend, you can find out how by going to cbnnews.com. We're coming back with an encouraging word for your Thursday. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I want to leave you with this thought and prayer as we fill this Thursday with thankfulness. God, my heart of gratitude gives rise to my hands. I lift them high in sincere surrender, knowing you owe me nothing, but you give me everything. Thank you. You are a gracious God. You are a good God. You are God alone. And for that, I say thank you. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online. That address, cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day this week. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless. Thank you for watching.